Hi, thank you. Uh, Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to connect with you virtually. Well, today it's a different world altogether. And I thought I'll share with you certain perspectives which I see on the horizon, which will be very relevant as you go forward. I have a presentation. Can somebody help me share my presentation, please? Thank you. So, when I talk about cyber security landscape, the first thing that hits me is that the last 24 hours, we've seen a U-turn by the government of India. The government of India, after 5 years of working in the Personal Data Protection Bill, decides to unilaterally withdraw the said bill. So, all those huge hours, months, years that went into deliberating, first in the form of Justice Sri Krishna Committee, and thereafter in the form of the report of Joint Parliamentary Committee, have all come to a grinding halt. As the government says, I'm now going to come up with a new law. Now, that's one side of the perspective. The other side is clearly that the government is saying the old law was not sufficient enough, was not comprehensive enough, and therefore I require a new law which is going to cover not just personal data, but also sensitive personal data. With the result that you are now going to be prepared for a new ecosystem. So let's be prepared for a humongous, huge legislation that's now going to come up, which is going to deal with not just personal data, but also non personal data. And therefore, the need for us to be tightening our belts is going to be very high. Because, like what happened in the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, we are going to be seeing a scenario where there could be two hemispheres. There could be the corporate hemisphere, who would be now required to comply with these new laws on data protection. And there'll also be a new hemisphere of government organizations who may be exempt from such an applicability of such kind of legislation. But having said that, there's no denying the fact that India is now at a very important, interesting cusp. 2023, India should see itself becoming the most populous nation in the world. But the scenario is, are we prepared? We don't have a dedicated cybersecurity law. Look at the concerns all around. And cybersecurity appears to be the single factor that's predominating almost all news clippings, news stories that are coming. And we are not alone in this huge new jungle of cybersecurity threats. This is an age where cyber attacks are the new normal. And therefore, attacks are happening all across the governments of the world, the critical information infrastructures of the world. And clearly, India is no exception. Look at the attacks on India. One statement by one political spokesperson of a political party, and that results into humongous volumes of cyber attacks on the government's websites, the government's networks, and even on corporate networks per se. So much so that we are so dependent on Aadhaar, but little do we realize that with government now joining a lot of things in the Aadhaar ecosystem, the Aadhaar ecosystem is getting more and more dangerous. It's completely unsecure. That's why the UIDI keeps on filing dozens of FIRs against people who violate the said cybersecurity of the Aadhaar ecosystem. Well, no longer the time has come that we can only give a lip service to cybersecurity. The time has come where we need to now give a specific focus on cybersecurity and adopt cybersecurity as a way of life. But why should we do so? Because internationally, there's no international law on cybersecurity. There's no international treaties on cybersecurity. So the governments of the world are saying, so no problem. I'm not waiting. Let me come up with my own dedicated laws on cybersecurity. So look at the list of the countries that are constantly growing. These are the new age big boys club where countries are coming up with dedicated national laws on cybersecurity, led by China, Vietnam, Singapore, Australia, Thailand. The list continues. And these are very, very broad national cybersecurity laws which are having extraterritorial applicability. Look at Vietnam. In its new cybersecurity law, it's actually described the entire internet as the national cyberspace. which means that the law is going to be applicable there. Look at cyber crimes all across. The golden age of cybercrime has already been ushered in with the coming of COVID 19. And this golden age of cybercrime is going to be with us for the next many, many decades. So let's be prepared for these growing cybercrime costs. Go to the darknet today morning and you realize a number of new darknet websites are offering cybercrime as a service using artificial intelligence. So now cyber criminals have become very, very smart. They don't want to dirty their own hands. They use the algorithms of AI for the purposes of going ahead and committing cyber crimes. On the other hand, law enforcement agencies are now using AI for fighting cyber crimes and cybersecurity breaches. But how do we deal with all this in this big data ecosystem where we are constantly generating huge volumes of data? India, particularly, is seeing the great Indian vomiting revolution, where Indians are vomiting data about their personal, professional, social lives without even thinking about the legal ramifications of the data that you leave behind. Good news, blockchain is quietly developing as a very important sustainable technology. And now, with the government of Andhra Pradesh using blockchain for saving its land records, it's a precursor for more e governance applications of blockchains. The judiciary is also now considering the use of blockchain for saving judicial records. But as a nation, we have still not done our homework. We have still confused people because we have not yet been very clear on our stand on legalities of bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. We have not learned from the countries like Belarus and Estonia, who have come up with enabling legal frameworks on crypto assets and cryptocurrencies. And our current ambiguous position in Budget 2022, which says pay me tax of 30,000, 30% of your sale transaction, and I'm okay, does not really sound a good bell because you don't yet still grant legality to crypto assets and currencies. And mind you, when you're talking about cyber security, let's be now prepared for this new paradigm of Internet of Things and Internet of Behavior. Because these are two paradigms where cybersecurity can be breached by a child. And in the absence of global norms on cybersecurity for IoT, the focus will have to be through legislation. The United States federal law on cybersecurity of IoT. Well, we're talking about facial recognition. I was traveling on one of the Indian airports last week, and I was asked to get my facial recognition captured. Much that I objected to it, I had no choice because I had to fly. But clearly, the legal policy and regulatory issues of facial recognition have to immensely be addressed because you don't know who's accessing your particular data. Quantum computing comes in as a breath of fresh air. But then again, when your passwords are going to be broken by quantum computing, the legalities of quantum computing will also have to be appropriately addressed. And now everybody is already talking of the metaverse. The first reception of metaverse took place, but more significantly, we're now beginning to see that crimes on the metaverse have begun in a big manner. Particularly, one of our clients have found that their female avatar on the metaverse has been digitally raped. And now we are expecting to file some proceedings under existing deficient present laws on how to provide remedy to the customers or the clients. But no mention about cybersecurity is going to be complete without mentioning specifically about about darknet per se. The need has come even more apparent that we need to be specifically focusing on the legalities of the darknet as we go forward. The data protection will have to be a very, very important player in this regard as we go forward. Uh, well, in my new book, New Cyber World Order Post COVID 19, I've argued that by the time the nations of the world are victorious against the current and subsequent wave of COVID 19 infections, we are going to enter into a new cyber age. A new cyber world order is going to await us, where states are getting very powerful. And you look at the legislation of states through COVID 19 times, these legislations in different states have only helped in strengthening the state power. We've also looked at how cybersecurity breaches will be the now new default normal, and increasing cybercrimes will be our daily companion. But somewhere down the line, I think cybersecurity will require far, far more attention than what's currently being given. And that's the reason why cybersecurity law, as a legal jurisprudential subject, is specifically getting more significance. India has done nothing on the legalities of cybersecurity. Yes, we did amend the Indian Information Technology Act 2000 in the year 2008, and we did come up with a very comprehensive definition, legal definition of what was cybersecurity. And that definition even holds good in today's scenario. But the fact remains is that we really did not come up with very interesting or cogent provisions specifically dealing with cybersecurity under the IT Act. 2013, we did come up with a national cybersecurity policy, a good document at that point of time, but unfortunately, it remained a mere paper tiger as we found that India chose not to implement the cybersecurity policy of 2013. Today, we are all talking and waiting for the last few years for the national cybersecurity strategy that the government is working on. And while the strategy could be a good news moving forward, I think in today's scenario, the time for strategy is long gone. The time for effective legislation and effective approaches at national level is the crucial necessity. Why? Because we are constantly under attack. So, given the fact that there is complete paucity of legal framework on cybersecurity, the government of India on 28th of June 2022 has implemented a new legal regime on cybersecurity. These are known as the Information Technology Directions 2022. The important thing is that these directions are now mandatory. These directions are applicable to five kinds of stakeholders, whether you are a service provider, intermediary, governmental organization, body corporate, or a data center. And if you are going to be now doing your operations, please remember you will have to mandatorily report your any cybersecurity breach, including the 15 cybersecurity breaches that have been stipulated under the law, uh, in the next 6 hours after you come to know about it. Now that's creating a huge confusion. When does the 6 hour begin? So my breach takes place on 1st of January 2022. I come to know it on 4th of August 2022. So the as per the law, that 6 hour time starts on 4th of August 2022 when you come to know about it for the first time. And you don't comply, they've actually made it an offense under the Information Technology Act, punishable with imprisonment and fine. So if you're the top management of a company, if you're a CEO, CXO, CIO, or any other information officer, or even a person who's a part of the board of directors of the company, please be prepared to now face criminal liability because these non compliances are going to put you in jail. And mind you, you commit an offense today. The government says, I'm going to put a Damocles sword on your head for the next 7 years. Because within the next 7 years, the said matter could be going ahead and could specifically be reported. You can be prosecuted. So please understand, they say, every man steals. The man who gets caught in India becomes a thief. You'll have to make sure that you don't become caught. Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very tall order. Why? Because, the way they've gone ahead and defined computer security, computer resources, there's no way you're going to get out of this mandatory reporting requirement. And please, let's understand one thing. They've talked about two broad umbrella items therein. These umbrella items include data breach and data leak. Any kind of data breach will have to be reported. Any kind of data leak, whether by the company or by its employees or its customers or its business partners, will have to be specifically reported in to the nodal agency on cybersecurity, being the Computer Emergency Response Team. Look at the other kind of grounds that have been now mandated: targeted scanning and probing of networks, compromise of critical systems, unauthorized access of ID systems, defacement of websites or intrusion into the websites, and unauthorized changes such as inserting malicious codes, malicious code attacks, spyware, ransomware, attacks on servers like database, mail, and DNS, identity theft, spoofing, phishing attacks, distributed denial of service attacks and denial of service attacks, SCADA attacks, attacks on e governance, e commerce, data breach, data leak, the two most significant elements you need to know, attacks on IoT, attacks on digital payments, malicious mobile applications, fake apps, unauthorized access to social media, attacks on malicious or suspicious activities affecting cloud computing, and of course, attacks on big data, blockchain, virtual assets, virtual asset exchanges, custodian wallets, and of course, attacks pertaining to AI. Now, the fact remains is by this IT Directions 2022, or the Computer Emergency Response Team of India, becomes one of the most powerful organizations in the country. And therefore, it's going to have a huge impact upon you. Please get your documented processes in place and don't, for God's sake, continue to keep on subscribing to the Indian Jugaad School of Management. Indians love Jugaad, and we love to do this permutations, combinations to bypass law. Please don't do that, because once you do that in the electronic ecosystem, please remember you actually commit electronic forgery. That becomes an offense with punishable with 7 years imprisonment and fine under section 468 of the Indian Penal Code, which is not going to be good news. Further, I think the kind of reputational ramifications that these non-reportings could potentially have is going to be humongous. Recently, one of our very big clients came to know that they have been breached. It took me personally about 9 hours for me to convince the CEO and the top board that you will have to mandatorily report, because they were in a state of complete denial. They said, no, nobody will come to know about it. We will all be fine. We will just fix it. And because if I report, my share prices go down. Little did they realize that if you once you had your legal knowledge and you didn't report it, you are going to be in much bigger troubled hot waters as we go forward. Further, under these new directions, if you're a data center, virtual private server provider, or a cloud service provider, you are now required to maintain accurate information of various kinds for a period of 5 years, or even longer, as may be mandated, after any cancellation or withdrawal of registration, as the case may be. And 5 years, why? Because the government wants you to map up these transactions and help the government as to how any particular violation or contravention has taken place. So you become active participants in the process of detection, investigation, and prosecution of cybersecurity breaches and contraventions under the existing law. You don't comply, no problem. It still becomes an offense, punishable with imprisonment and fine. So either way, your hands are going to be tied down. You're going to be pushed into deep sea waters, and you will be asked to swim. So this kind of new legal frameworks means that you will have to now get new legal approaches on how to deal with this entire scenario. So there's no denying the fact that these directions are landmark and are going to completely change the scenario, but they are only interim in nature. They still don't fill up the vacuums and the lacuna that is existing because of the absence of a dedicated law on cybersecurity. Mind you, a lot of elements pertaining to edge security are also specifically covered under the IT directions. So if your devices are increasingly getting connected on the edge of the network, please make sure that your devices are appropriately complying with applicable provisions of law per se. I'm saying, look, do whatever you want to do. Get your paperwork ready. In India, when the knock comes on your door, or the police arrives, or a summon from the court arrives, they are not going to hear what your verbal testimony is. They're not even interested. If you have papers to show that you've complied, good. They will entertain that. You don't have papers, no problem. You face the consequences of the law. So it'll be the important mandatory duty of corporate stakeholders to ensure that they have documented due diligences, not just for cybersecurity, but also as due diligences for their capacities as intermediaries and also in their capacities as data entities under the Information Technology Act 2000. So I think legal compliance will have to be the new mindset as we go forward. You can no longer say, well, I will manage things. The age and era of managing has now gone. The law has become very strict. And mind you, if you violate the law, ignorance of law becomes no excuse in the eyes of law. And as I come to the close of my presentation, I can tell you, look at Section 21W of the Information Technology Act 2000. And that's going to make you sit up and wonder in amazement as to how broadly this section has been drafted so as to cover almost all corporate entities. So if you're a company today, you definitely become an intermediary because you are a legal entity who, on behalf of another person, is receiving, storing, or transmitting any particular electronic record or providing services with respect to that record. And you purely become a network service provider, you become internet service provider, you become data center, you become whatever. So even if you're doing nothing and you're providing connectivity to your employees, please remember you become an intermediary. Please remember the Supreme Court, in the case of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, has gone ahead and upheld the IT Act and the liability of intermediaries and also the exemption granted to them. Please understand, as companies, if you are an intermediary, you don't comply with law, please be prepared for two kinds of legal consequences under the IT Act. You can be sued for unlimited damages by way of compensation, and you can also face criminal imprisonment, which could range from 3 years to life imprisonment, fine ranging from 1 lakh rupees to 10 lakh rupees. And the government on 25th of February 2021 has already now come up with the IT Directions 2021. These are mandatory. There are additional compliances you have to do. You don't comply, remember Rule 7 of the IT Rules 2021. The moment you don't comply with these IT Rules 2021, you not only lose your statutory exemption from legal liability under Section 79 of the IT Act, you also become liable for being punished for various offenses under the Information Technology Act 2000 and the Indian Penal Code. Please remember the Delhi High Court, in the case of X versus Union of India, has upheld the legality of these issues or these provisions pertaining to compliances by intermediaries. In this case, I was assisting the Delhi High Court in my capacity as an amicus curiae. So clearly, in this new age, deterrence all across, you have to be prepared for all kind of unexpected twists and turns. And in this way forward, cyber insurance could be yet another interesting mechanism that you could adopt so as to limit your liability. But please read the fine print very, very carefully. Most of these cyber insurance firms are fantastic experts in excluding almost everything in the world under their exclusion clauses in fine print. And finally, I believe the role of capacity building has become even more significant in today's scenario amongst corporates, amongst the governments, amongst the digital stakeholders at large. We've created an online platform called cyberlawuniversity.com, where I've actually gone ahead and offered about 36 online courses. These are various courses on cyber law, cybercrime law, cyber security law, artificial intelligence law, blockchain law, IoT law, and big data law. So with more than 7,500 students and professionals across the world, the figures are telling us, sir, there's a need for more capacity building. I conclude by saying, ladies and gentlemen, let's realize in today's world, cybersecurity and cybercrime represents an important element of our lives. Therefore, compliance with cyber legal frameworks will be of absolute essentiality as we go forward in our way in this new world of cybersecurity breaches, and cyber attacks. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me this opportunity.